Hi, everyone. As many of you know, I'm Andy Arthur. I'm the MCC Thrift Coordinator for Saskatchewan, and I'm Lizzie's husband. A few months ago, I had the opportunity to go to Kenya with an MCC Strategic Learning Tour. Our partners in East Africa have been seeing the impacts of the large volumes of secondhand textiles. So a small group of our MCC thrift folks and our advocacy network went to meet with our international partners to see the challenges, opportunities, and meet with those already trying to make a difference. So I'm glad to be able to share about what we saw and what we learned on our trip. While lots of what we found was heavy and heart-wrenching, I want you to remember that in many ways, or most of you have been on the forefront of making a positive difference. In this context, I'm preaching to the choir. And I don't think my clicker is working. Has it been moving? Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, it's on. Okay. So I'll start with Matthew 25. It's a familiar passage. Jesus is clear what it is to be a sheep and follow him. Menno Simons reinforces this with his writings on true evangelical faith. It's part of our Anabaptist DNA. It is therefore natural that when North America or Europe, we have large excesses of clothing that we want to share with other countries. Countries like Mozambique, Ghana, Chile, and Kenya. We share a lot, in fact. Over 200,000 metric tons of used clothing was sold to Kenya just this last year. This is clothing that might not have been usable at a thrift shop or homeless shelter or gone into a clothing bin. It often ends up being baled together and shipped. The clothing makes its way to large ports. It's resorted and rebaled. In Kenya, this is the main market of Gikomba. So the amount of clothes in Gikomba market was mind-boggling, even for someone who has been a receiver at an MCC thrift shop. There are 100,000 people who work there and estimated about 28 million items of clothing in that market every day. When these items don't sell, the most likely outcome is for them to be dumped by the edge of the Nairobi River. While we were standing on that shifting mass of damp clothes intertwined with the bale ties, one of our guides explained that a few months ago during heavy rains, the clothing bunched up in the river, forming a makeshift dam, and then it flooded that community. 50 people died. When our attempts of clothing the naked causes significant environmental and health impacts, we end up being a wolf in sheep's clothing or a goat in sheep's clothing. When we don't want garbage in our backyard, we put it in someone else's. 40% of the textiles that are shipped to Kenya are just waste. This goes into their dump sites. And dump sites are not a new concept. In Jesus' day, there was a pit outside of Jerusalem. It was called Gehenna, or Valley of Hinnom. It had been used as a place of child sacrifice in the Old Testament times. In medieval times, it would be used as a burning dump site. Jesus references Gehenna 12 times. It's often translated to the word hell. It is associated with fire and a place of judgment. In Matthew 25, it is like the place where goats go, those who have not cared for their neighbor. This medieval painting of Gehenna looks like a lot how pop culture would depict hell. Burning, smoky, people being tortured, people in need of clothing. The literal place of Gehenna was used as a metaphor for judgment and the consequence of sin. So while in Kenya, we visited a place much like the medieval Gehenna. Dandora dumpsite is the largest in East Africa. It's layered with textiles, plastics, and other garbage. It's 73 acres and in places 150 feet tall. It is randomly combusts, so the air is always thick with toxic smoke. It looked like a hellscape. There are too, like images of Gehenna, were people living in torturous conditions. One difference is rather than being naked, they were heaped with clothing that was of no use to them. There are around 5,000 waste pickers, many born into this dump site and have been working for decades. Typically 12-hour days, 7 days a week, picking up small bits of what could still be recycled. Unfortunately, besides zippers, there was not much that of value in clothing. The waste pickers would make about $1 to $2 a day. One of our tour guides, Joyce, learned as a toddler how to sort by playing in the dump while her mother worked. She began working with her mother when she was 6 years old. While she was still young, her mother became very ill from the toxic smoke, and she never recovered. She has died a few years ago. Dandora, like Gehenna, to me is a place of judgment, not for the waste pickers, but for those of us who have casually overconsumed. This dump site was a prime example of environmental racism. Kenya, like many other countries, has tried to ban the importing of secondhand clothing, but Western nations have leveraged loans or promises of aid to disallow the Kenyan government to create a ban. In North America, we don't want these textiles in our landfills, so we ship them to another place, to another group's landfill. So I'm going to share a little bit about a journey of a clothing item. So you can imagine maybe a cotton clothing item. Maybe it's from a fun run, so it was used for just a few hours. And we'll say that this item was clothing, or made of cotton, and so that it was likely grown in China or India, and the process of making that t-shirt probably happened in Southeast Asia. And just making the one t-shirt would take about 2,700 liters of water. And the textile workers would often be working in very poor conditions and getting paid very little. The average Canadian purchases 70 new items of clothing or accessories per year. So imagine a t-shirt for an event. This is worn for 3 hours, and this is going to be its primary use. After sitting in the closet and getting slightly musty for 6 months, it went to a thrift shop. We'll say it went to an MCC thrift shop. Randy received it, Susan sorted it, Helen hung it, Teresa tagged it, Sandra stocked it, Ruth rotated it after 3 weeks, Cindy called it. It was sent to a community partner. They couldn't even give it away. They sent it to someone who shipped it. It was touched by more than 8 people, none of whom wanted it. It was trucked to a baling facility like Toronto. It was resorted, though North American sorting is very limited. It was baled and shipped, sometimes to an intermediary country like Pakistan or India. And then it was resorted and rebaled. It will then be shipped to a country like Mozambique, Ghana, Chile, or Kenya. We'll say that it went to Kenya. It'll be assessed in the port of Mombasa, and 1 to 2 middle buyers will purchase the bale. It'll go to the market of Gikomba. It'll be carried into the market. Again, customers will look at it, but no one will want it. The vendor will put it into a bin going to Africa Collects Textiles, a great group trying to reuse, recycle, and upcycle. It was touched by more than 5 people, none of whom wanted it. Africa Collects Textiles will resort it, find that it's cotton, cut it into rag-sized pieces, rebale it, and ship it to India. In India, it will be shredded and reconstituted as baby wipes or paper towel. It might even come back to North America for its final sale, where again, it will be used briefly. So the long story short, many clothing items will spend more time traveling the globe than you will. And in this story, could be touched by around 30 to 40 people to only be used briefly twice. Not the most efficient system I can imagine. And this is the more ideal process because this is only available for 100% cotton items that has some ability to be recycled. So I hope North Americans can think differently about clothing. I'm sure this group is purchasing less than 70 items per year, so thanks for pulling down the average. When you mend your clothes, shop secondhand or volunteer with a thrift shop, particularly our MCC thrift volunteers. Thanks everybody who's here. We help divert a large volume of items that are going to places like Kenya. Many of our thrift volunteers, and likely many of you, are gifted in being frugal, possibly by necessity. Perhaps you or your parents went through the Great Depression, and I admire these gifts, and they still hold great value. It does take a shift in recognizing the Western world is suffering from a different kind of depression, one caused by overconsumption. The mindset of everything can be used, and someone's going to want this, on a personal level can be useful, but on a collective scale, it can lead to dumping of our excess onto others who do not want it. We're going to have to do better at managing our own waste. So many examples of what we saw in Kenya from groups trying to work hard to divert waste were very similar to what we do in our thrift shops as well. Some of you might have been some of these early adopters into these techniques. Combined, all of our thrift shops do upcycle a lot of items, and this is continuing to grow and expand. We are sharing more ideas and items across our network. It adds up, and it will always be part of the solution. But MCC Thrift does not have the capacity to upcycle the majority of what comes in. We will continue to need to research new ways to break down clothing fibers by methods like biodigesters and shredders. MCC Thrift is actively working with universities and other textile salvage operations to try and find large-scale reuse and recycle opportunities. One barrier to this relatively new field is a lack of comprehensive regulations. Even if we had a shredder operational, we wouldn't be able to use the end product of that currently. If we want to make substantial impact on this and other large global challenges, we'll need to not only live quiet on the land, but to try to advocate. This does require us living out our values so that we're not hypocrites. We'll need to make broad cultural shifts, call our government and corporations to account for the ways that they encourage these issues. I know not everyone might be excited about regulations, but God did set a clothing regulation in Old Testament law. And if we had continued this practice, we would have avoided creating so much clothing that is extremely difficult to recycle. In Leviticus 19:19, it says, "Do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material." In our area, all clothing, it seems, are some blended of fibers. We blend viscous fibers like cotton with synthetic like polyester. We shorten this, and when we do that, it shortens the synthetic fiber. This increases the volume of microplastics that get leached out. So in a city like Saskatoon, that would leach about 2 metric tons of microplastics into our year just from washing our clothes. And so for a city like Nairobi, I can't begin to calculate how many tons of microplastics would be in their drinking water. Even when we recognize the issue is a challenge, trying to push governments and corporations to do the right thing can be difficult because of gaps of knowledge. For example, Europe, who is far more advanced with research in textile salvage, is currently expanding their end producer responsibility. This is a great thing, getting companies to figure out ways to reuse their products. The issue is the current solution that they're using is they're bundling textiles together and sending them to incinerators in Europe to do power generation. But now they're saying, oh, we can reuse these textiles, we shouldn't send them to the incinerator. And so what happens is we send them more to countries like Kenya, and so they'll end up in Dandora. As most things in life, this comes down to real partnerships and relationships. When we actually know the person we're helping or caring for, it has a much greater and more positive impact. In Matthew 25, it sounds often like the carer knows the person they're caring for. That doesn't mean that we always have to help locally, but we can take time to understand our global partners' actual needs. Now, all of these systems of textile production, the inability to recycle the materials in scale, the environmental and human harm, it can all feel overwhelming. The challenges are massive, and MCC Thrift has been trying to do research and look for solutions for more than 15 years. There are no easy answers or quick fixes. Thrift is part of the solution. By shopping thrift first or volunteering with MCC Thrift, you are helping to reduce the demand to make new items. This last year, the 6 MCC thrift shops in Saskatchewan sold about 1 million items. So again, a shout out to all of you who are helping price and sort those items. I do hold on to hope, though. Just over 50 years ago, MCC supporters, including some of you folks, heard from MCC partners that sending clothes internationally was not working. It wasn't made for the right climate or style or size. What they needed was cash to buy clothing in their local context. So 4 women in Altona opened an MCC thrift shop and turned our clothing into cash. This idea spread rapidly, and again, even some of you folks here today helped expand this vision. This was a grassroots idea. The initial groups had very limited resources, but they started something massive. Now MCC Thrift has raised more than $300 million for MCC's work and reused countless items. So while we are at a similar juncture of MCC partners asking we not send textile waste to them, I have hope that a thrifty group, who will most likely be women, will have an idea that spreads. The other picture on this slide is a group of Maasai women we met. They were a village and loan saving circle. These 4 women are part of a MCC project of 22 women saving their collective small earnings to empower members of their group to buy loans, to get things like water tanks. And this group collectively decided to buy chairs, which they rent out to large group functions. Last year, this group made more than $10,000 Canadian and were able to buy land as a group. In Maasai culture, assets are always owned by the men. And so this was the first time in their community that women had ever owned an asset before. As one of our team members said, when a group of women come together with a common purpose, beautiful things happen. I will continue to hold out hope for those who are trapped in places like Gehenna. I will continue to work to better use and share the abundance we have in our communities. I'll continue to research and advocate for better ways to upcycle and recycle textile waste. And I hope you will continue to as well. Thanks.